So next up, so as someone with a foot in the corporate world and the business world, and then also in the academic world from my work at Columbia University, always particularly interested in corporate and education partnerships and discussions and all of that. So I'm really looking forward to this next talk, which is from Bruce Cronquist and Todd from Dell Technologies in Seattle and Suzanne Walsh from Bennett College in Greensboro, North Carolina. And they're going to talk to us about engagement between corporate L&D and education sectors. So a really interesting talk that I'm looking forward to. Thanks to all three of you for being here. And I'm going to turn it over to you if you want to share your screen and get started whenever you're ready.
Everyone's having a great morning, great afternoon.
Yeah, I posted a link to a survey in the chat. If you wouldn't mind, go ahead and click on it and take it real quick. It's just a couple of questions. We're kind of comparing the data of who was attending the conference. We posted this in the blog before the conference, and also to find out everybody who's in attendance to the session today a little bit about what your goals are for the talk, and we'll kind of compare the results as part of the talk.
All right, so yeah, we've got the questions here. So everyone just go ahead and go through. We'll give you some time to fill that out. And Bruce, if you can monitor that and just let me know when to move forward.
Sure, but we can go start with the introduction and stuff.
Yeah. You want to start, Bruce, and then Suzanne and I can go?
Oh, sure. Yeah, so my name is Bruce Cronquist with Dell Technologies, and it's kind of fun when we were presenting this talk, working with Suzanne. It's fun because both Todd and I work in the corporate world during the day, and we also teach through the universities at night. So we are, as had been mentioned beforehand in the introductions, we kind of work on both worlds. I've been with Dell for, well, actually, the bios and stuff are online, so won't worry about boring you with that. I think everybody's here for the discussion.
And I've been with Dell for about 6 years now. Before that, I've been in tech for about 20 years altogether. Was with Microsoft for a little while, but also worked for different colleges, was a LMS administrator for a while for Blackboard and Moodle, worked with faculty, teach them how to teach online, and worked with them to convert their face-to-face curriculums to online curriculums. And then I was doing project management stuff at Microsoft, and then came back to Dell and got back into training and education.
I'm Suzanne Walsh, president of Bennett College, a historically Black college for women in Greensboro, North Carolina. And I have been in this gig for about 19 months. And prior to that was in philanthropy, and prior to that was in higher ed before, but love finding out about how folks in the corporate world are thinking about learning and development, because it's oddly disconnected and often really different than what's happening in higher ed, but really relevant to our faculty and our staff as we're going to learn moving forward.
All right, so here we'll open up this is the survey, but let's get to the results.
It looks like one person has filled the response out.
There we go. So we've got which sector. So we've got, it's even corporate education. Over the last 2 years, what were your two biggest challenges? We've got COVID-19, maintaining integrity, and uncertainty.
No shock there.
Yeah, definitely a lot of uncertainty over the last year. All right, cool. So that gives us an idea of where people are. All right, so where we met was our origin story is we met at Learnapalooza in Seattle. So it was online conferences last year. And so Bruce and I were presenting our TBL presentation that we actually gave yesterday. So same presentation. So if you guys attended that yesterday, you've got an idea of what we were presenting here at Learnapalooza. So this is where we met Suzanne, who was attending that. We just started talking afterwards. We were presenting on TBL and how that benefited us at Dell. And so then Suzanne saw a potential benefit at Bennett, and then we connected afterwards. So that's how we all met. Bruce, Suzanne, was there anything you guys wanted to throw in on that part?
Oh.
Okay. So in the beginning, we were calling this an engagement, but this is, when we started working on this more, we realized that this was a relationship. It's not just, engagement seemed really formal, it was more, we were getting together, we were talking, we were checking in with each other. And so it became this relationship. And it's a cyclical process or relationship. So in the beginning, we got together, we learned about each other. When you first get together, it's almost like dating, right? Where you're getting together, you're learning about each other, you're learning about, you're identifying strengths and weaknesses. By doing that, when you start identifying some of those strengths and weaknesses, you start seeing potential areas for potential volunteer areas where you can help out, where you may have some strengths and be able to help out the other group and vice versa. Also, just to go back, just to the learn about each other, it's important in the beginning it doesn't have to be formal, but it just get together and just start talking. When we met Suzanne, we first had a meeting with Bennett where she brought in some of her faculty, and we just started talking about, hey, what are you guys doing? This was like right at the beginning of COVID, right? So you guys were just experiencing that and thinking of how you're going to pivot. And so we just started talking about what you guys were experiencing. And it came up that Bruce and I were like, oh yeah, we used to work in colleges, so we're familiar with what you guys are going through. We know what you guys are going to have to go through. So that helped out also. All of us started having similar understandings. So we learned about each other, then we identified strengths and weaknesses. We found some areas. We found out that in tech, we're more advanced in a lot of ways of like technical skills because we just do it every day. We're in Outlook. We live in Outlook, basically. And so stuff like that is really easy for us to be able to help. Whereas Bennett, they're maybe learning some of the stuff that's going to help them in Outlook. They may not know all of it. So that's one thing we identified. We were able to help them upskill in Outlook. It was something that was super easy for us. Wouldn't have probably given it a second thought, but when we started talking and building this relationship and we were dating, we found out that we could help out with Outlook, and that would be a benefit there. And then after we've sort of done the pilot and the volunteer work, we recommend like piloting, doing a test first, starting small, because it's a lot easier to recover if something goes sideways in a pilot. In a smaller scale, it's not going to blow up big. So, I mean, it's just sort of common sense, but we want to make sure that we state that start small, baby steps, start figuring out your guys' relationship, how you guys work together, what works, maybe doesn't work, but start small, do a pilot, see how that goes, check in with each other. And then once that's done, check in, and it's iterative. It's not just one and done, but it's check in again, see where they are now, see what you can help out with. And it's iterative. Build on your previous experiences and make that experience stronger, make it a better experience as you go, and just, yeah, iterative, build on it. And then it just sort of goes back to the beginning, whether it's your first time getting together or you've done a project and you're coming back, it's always you come back around and then you start talking again, start figuring out, hey, what have you guys been working on? How'd that go with our last project? Is there anything that came out of that maybe we could help with in a new project? So it's not just one and done, but it's this relationship that can be ongoing if it works out, and if it's beneficial, it can be a great relationship where each other can help each other out. And we'll talk some more about that in the next slides. All right, Bruce.
Yep, perfect. Yeah, so just real quick, a 30-second summary. What the first thing that caught Suzanne's attention that we talked about with her staff was topic-based design. And what is, instead of the standard learning to where we pretty much try and shove everything into it, brain barf style, and teach everything, which of course we know with Ebbinghaus's forgetting curve, people remember very little of it, is we look at it based on the tasks that the learners are trying to do. So we pick a skill that we're trying to develop, for example, driving a car, break it down to the topics such as being able to accelerate, being able to brake, being able to park, and then breaking those down into the actual tasks that you need to do in order to accomplish those. Smoothly applying the gas in order to safely merge into highway traffic. And that is a task, and tasks are always measurable. And then we can break those things down into the steps. And it's just a different way of thinking that we could bring to her staff, especially like the professors, which might have taken all the content they used to do in an ILT and trying to do it in a virtual session. It's much easier, and people remember it if you start breaking down to just a few things that they need to know, and then pointing out saying, well, changing a tire, yeah, we can show you how to change a tire, but hey, there's a YouTube video for that, or it's covered in the user's guide that came with the car. So when you actually need it, in time of need, go watch the YouTube video and change your tire, or go to the user's manual and read the steps there. You don't need to do that actually in a class setting. So that's kind of what TBL is in a nutshell. I'll go for the next one, Todd.
Yeah, let me unmute. Just have to apologize. I brought my kids to this conference, so if you hear yelling in the background, if you see me yelling, that's on mute. That's tell them to be quiet. All right, so let's move forward. All right. So as far as the corporate culture, hold on. Let me. I'm sorry, I'm gonna mute.
Yeah, Todd, I can go take over. Do you want me to get? I can go if you want, or yeah, go for it.
I'll start at the beginning. So as far as the corporate culture, yeah, we just want to give you an idea. If you're coming from education, you may not be familiar with sort of what the corporate culture is like, and vice versa. So as far as corporate culture, it's rapid pace. It's very fast paced. We make decisions very fast. The old saying, "Time's money," really holds true. So it's not all about money. There's a lot of volunteering in here as well, but time is money. And so we make decisions fast, we move fast. And that's what we found, not just working with Bennett, but I found that working with other colleges. Colleges are a slower pace. It's a longer cycle. It can be a year or longer. Whereas with corporate, it can be 2 weeks to a month, or maybe 3 months to do something where it can be a lot longer in education. So it's understanding that it's rapid pace. Bruce, I think you've got the next one.
Yep. Second bullet, innovative. Dell and most companies foster a culture of innovation and exploration. You might have heard the term fail fast, and corporations try and follow that, as long as the failure doesn't cost the company too much money. But usually innovative, cutting edge, using the most up-to-date software. Actually, Suzanne will cover kind of the education side of it, but usually the colleges are a lot of time using older versions of software. They may not be using the software to its fullest potential, and corporations can kind of help in that area.
Yep. We're also data driven. A lot of corporations, if they weren't already, are moving towards more data driven and making decisions based on data and not just hunches or feelings, but really having the data to back that up. We're accountable to shareholders, so we have to have data to say why we did something. If we did something wrong, we need to have data to show us sort of what we did wrong, or be able to look through stuff. So very data driven, almost sometimes to a fault, that we don't move unless we have data to back it up. So sort of good, sort of bad, but that's definitely a corporate culture, is a lot more data. We see that with schools. They're becoming more data driven decisions, but definitely with corporate culture.
Analysis paralysis.
Yeah.
So yeah, the fourth one is giving back. A lot of companies are spending more time or giving the employees more chances to go out and give back to the community. It not only helps with the corporate image, but also studies have shown that if a employer or employee is able to give back as part of their job, they have a higher satisfaction rating in terms of employee satisfaction, and they're more likely to stick around, so that job retention goes up. And Dell's our actual culture code says we have annual goals, and our individual development plan, or IDPs, we have to include how we're giving back to our profession, to the community, and we're actually graded on or reviewed upon that. It also gives us a chance to practice our skill. In this case, with Todd and I engaging with Bennett, we're able to develop some of our skills in terms of topic-based learning, L&D, stakeholder engagement, things like that. So this giving back also turns out to be professional development.
All right. On to Bennett's culture.
So we're, as I mentioned earlier, we're a historically Black college for women. We in the American South. So for those of you who are international, and we have limited resources. We're not a government funded entity, so everything is tuition driven. So that sets a very different kind of context, maybe than a larger public university. And so as a result, the technology skills are really underdeveloped at our institution. So when I arrived in 2019, as Todd and Bruce know, the college was using Windows XP, and no one here thought that was unusual. And I had just come from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, just to give a compare and contrast. And so really what happens is a lot of times these institutions are not, as Bruce and Todd talked about, they're not really at the cutting edge of technology. And so the leap from Windows XP to then going to Office 365 was significant. And so that was part of where it was really important for me to be able to turn to folks who could help understand the starting place of our faculty and staff in order to get them to the next level. And we just don't have time. Like I came into a situation where we really needed to move quickly, not just because of COVID, but we needed to make some significant changes at Bennett. Even with that, I didn't have the talent on staff who understood learning and development. We understand teaching and learning in a very specific way. We understand it as it relates to students, and our students are traditional age students. We have that. So 18 to 24-year-olds, that we understood. But I think, as a lot of you know, in a corporate environment, or those of you who are in higher ed, we don't necessarily understand, if that's our specialty, traditional age students, we really don't understand learning and development when it comes to adults. And so how do faculty and staff really learn? That's not part of our culture. We don't think about that. Professional development is training in our context, and training is, for the love of God, an 8-hour session where no one remembers anything. But people obsess if they didn't have, or they don't have, an 8-hour training session, or like a week of somebody coming to campus and just talking at them, lecturing, for a full week, 8 hours a day, then they don't think that that counts somehow. So so what was really interesting was a lack of time. We needed to get up to speed quickly on new products, but also I needed to shift everybody's mindset. That's why that Learnapalooza session was so intriguing to me. How do you move people away from a context where they already don't have any time, but somehow they want to make time for 8 hours of learning? It's sort of a crazy situation to be in. So task-based learning really helped us to address the lack of time. And we have launched a new strategic direction. So the timing of culture change at Bennett and coinciding with meeting the team from Dell has been really significant. If we didn't have access to Todd and to Bruce, we actually wouldn't have been able to move very quickly. We wouldn't have been able to help our faculty and staff adjust and prepare to be virtual when that's not really our tradition or our history. So I think that the culture, we met at a moment where our culture is changing. And so we were sort of primed for, I think, this sort of relationship. So when you're a corporation thinking about, one of the things that you understand is you understand speed, you understand, how to get people up to speed on things. And you also understand adult learning in ways that you can't presume that we necessarily understand. We understand classroom learning, but we don't necessarily understand or think about teaching and learning or learning and development in the context of adults.
Next slide. All right, so here we're talking about the benefits, the win-win. So as far as the private sector, one of the things that we got out of this was being able to, well, actually, Bruce, why don't you start with the first part, and then I'll move on to the second. Sorry.
Yeah, sure. No, that's fine. So yeah, again, I had mentioned earlier that this allowed us to actually, practice topic-based learning with the Bennett staff. It kind of helped them to identify and prioritize the tasks, or making separating the need to know from the nice to know information. And we were working with both the faculty, the students, and the staff, or at least trying to apply it to each of those situations. We also had a chance to play with our instructional design skills for topic-based learning. We'll talk a little bit in a moment about some Outlook training that we did, and just kind of played with the format of it. Second one also is the curate and creating content. As a corporation, we have lots of tools that allow us to create things that the colleges may not have. Whether we're using Storyline, Camtasia, all the tools that are in our content development tool, or ID tool belt. They may not be able to afford it or have those. We actually have access to those. The one example is when Suzanne's and her staff had mentioned they needed some training in Outlook, how to go about using it. So as Todd mentioned earlier, we use it all the time. So what Todd and I did is we kind of faked that we at the end of a meeting, and we had our desktop shared, and when we finished the meeting and he and I were talking, looking at your inbox going, wow, you only have, 5 items in your inbox. How did you do that? Oh, that's because I used a focused inbox, blah, blah, blah. And we ended up creating a training that was more of a discussion between him and I saying, oh, well, that's cool. How do you do focused inbox? And somebody else says, oh, well, I set up rules. How do you do that? So it was a banter between him and I. We just recorded it in Zoom and turned it into a training. And that was unique to Bennett because, first of all, it was fun. We were having some barbs with management and things in our discussions, but also it was true application of how to use the different features of Outlook versus okay, today we're going to discuss rules. For the next hour, we're going to practice creating rules. It was just him and I bantering back and forth. And I think, Suzanne, you mentioned that format landed pretty well with the folks.
It did. I mean, look, first of all, everybody was resistant to it, right? Because they want Dell to show up on campus and train for 8 hours, and they couldn't imagine they could learn via video. But it was like perfectly timed. It was snackable. And then even more importantly, because it was a video, we could post it on Slack and then people could go back to it afterwards. If we had done in-person training with Dell for 8 hours, we don't get to then have Dell show up the next day, or we can't just call them with our questions and say, oh, could you repeat everything you just did yesterday? I think this video, and the video that was tailor-made for us, but quite frankly, could be used by Dell to work with any other institution. I think that was really beneficial. So how do you create repurposable, reusable resources, not just for the corporation, but for the college? So a new person comes in, they don't know how to use a focused inbox, or they just haven't really lived in an inbox like some of us have. It's now available as a resource, and we're creating a library of resources that we wouldn't have had if we took a different approach.
Yeah, that segues right into the internal reuse and content piece of this. Yeah, we were able to take that content, like Suzanne said, use it for Bennett and what we were trying to do there, but then we were also able to publish it to our internal site, and our employees will be able to use it now to learn more about Outlook and how to use that. So it's a win-win there for both of us. Also, we're able to provide real world experience and advice, because we're in it day to day. And this is a lot of what schools are trying to get their students ready for, is the real world, and to work and live in the real world. And so we're able to bring that just day to day, what we're seeing real world, and bring that back into the school and share that in our whatever we're doing, the trainings or the relationship, and bring that back. Also, the application of adult learning theory. We know that adult learners seek out relevant, meaningful either experiences or content at the time of need, when they need to learn that. And so through doing these volunteering opportunities, we're able to, like Bruce said, practice our own skills, our instructional design. It's putting it at that time of need. We're using it to help someone, but we're also using it in a different context than just in Dell. We're used to using it in a technical, how you develop technical training. But in this case, we're able to develop, it's still a little technical, but it's different. It's in a different sector in education. So there's just different things to learn about, but it helps us be able to just sharpen our skills and be able to use that process in other areas. Bruce, did you have the last one? Was it
technical training? I think we've already kind of talked about that,
Yeah.
that we're able to add that. But Suzanne, do you want to talk about the Teach Learn Center, some of the first adopters there on your staff? And
yeah. So one part of what happened in those iterative conversations is, I really want to go back and say what first happened was Bruce and Todd just called and basically not called. They had scheduled a Zoom and just basically were like, so what's happening on your campus? Like, what's going on? And I think it was more of a therapy session for me. I'm not sure. I just sort of did a brain dump of like, this is everything that's happening. And they actually listened really carefully and started to parse out opportunities to be able to support Bennett. So I didn't really come in with a specific ask. They actually were very consultative in the way that they listened, and then said, oh, well, did you know about, or have you thought about? And one of the things that they did, so they did that just with me when we first met, then with our faculty and staff, they did the same thing. And so we really had not talked about at Bennett having a teaching and learning center, or, a learning and development area focused on our faculty and staff until we had those conversations. And with Bruce and Todd and thinking about how can we use, now that we have this Microsoft Office suite that's finally modern, how could we use that to create a virtual center for teaching and learning? So that's been really exciting, but that came out of those conversations. We wouldn't have necessarily, I don't think we would have gotten there as quickly. We may have gotten there, but not that quickly. It's been really great to think about what are some opportunities for some conferences. I think that there's going to be opportunities for our faculty and staff in conjunction with Bruce and Todd, or even myself, to think about how we present this at education conferences. I think one of the challenges that we make in one of the challenges I think in higher ed and even K-12 is you think, oh yes, we want to partner with a company, but we don't know what that means. And I think that this sort of roadshow of saying there are lots of ways to partner. It's not just about a check, or it's not just about product. There are services that you all have that you can provide to us, which includes instructional design insights. Again, our faculty, great faculty, they know how to work with our students, but they don't know how to receive, and we don't have a tradition of professional development. At the same time, a lot of what we are learning with this partnership with Dell, we're able to apply in the classroom. So our faculty are also taking these ideas and saying, well, how can I apply this sort of an approach in my classroom with my students? They're thinking about making more kind of snackable or task-based learning for their students. So I think that's huge and much needed. Obviously, peer review articles are something that we're very interested in thinking about. We also can contribute to the, I think to a corporation or to Dell. We do have the academic research, and we do have a group of students, faculty, and staff who can be kind of a test bed. As you're thinking about new products, new solutions, new approaches, I would hope that corporations would start to look to colleges and universities and say, is that a place we could test an idea? Is that a place we could test a product? Not just always, again, going for, oh my gosh, it's time to sell something, but we actually need help sort of testing this. Does this really work? Does it make sense? And for us, we have a unique audience. So especially if you're interested in reaching communities of color, if you're interested in reaching women, we're ideal for that kind of a thing. But I think we also have things that we can share back about teaching and learning and identity development and all of those sorts of things that I think sometimes are missing in that corporate context. So in this instance, I think we have lots and lots that we can share back, but it really is this continuous cycle. I don't know that Dell realizes they're stuck with us forever, or that Todd and Bruce specifically know that. But that's part of what's happened is we keep finding other things to work on together. And I think that's exciting.
Yeah, do we go for the next slide, Todd? Because we're gonna start what kind of a list of benefits. So, but we can, we have the list here. We kind of try to do this more as a discussion, but you can kind of read some of the advantages for the corporations. There's a tax advantage. As Suzanne had mentioned, a lot of time they go, oh, Dell, you can get us, cheaper free laptops. Well, yeah, there is the Dell.org, which is our CEO and his wife's, way of giving back to society. But there's also things like professional services. Hey, do you need to go and set up new servers? You need to go and make the switch to Office 365. We have people which do that for corporations. Can we get that cheaper, free for the different, for the educational institutions? Giving back, hopefully that improves the corporate image. Maybe a professor goes, hey, Dell's been helping me. Maybe they'll look at a Dell laptop instead of a Toshiba or competitor's product. Already mentioned there's the increased employee retention. I was trying to get some information on that, and our sales department is really hard to actually break down going, well, how much does corporate image actually help, increase people purchasing products? We know about how to increase employee retention, but we know that it's a positive impact. Some of the new things that came up is the Dell student certification. Todd's and my engagement with Bennett, we had actually reported up to, I think Cindy, she's 3 levels up, Todd, if I remember correctly, above us. And they were so interested in what we end up doing, they actually created 2 new positions in education services, which is just for university engagement. And what's turned out right now is we actually have a Dell student certification that we're rolling out to colleges, to where if the student takes this content, it's kind of like a Microsoft certified professional, but it's for students. If they attain the certification, that we now know that they have the certain information or knowledge about computers and Dell systems and things. And when they come to Dell with this, the human resources department knows, hey, this person is ready for an internship. They're ready for a, entry level type position at Dell. And that's what this position has been, created based upon the experiences that we've had with Bennett. We forgot to remove all of our notes on the slide, Todd. Work on the bullet title. Yes.
Yeah.
So there actually is increased consumption of our training and certifications. That university engagement position is also working on trying to roll out like the certified professional certificates to some of the colleges and giving them for a cheaper price instead of whatever normal it is at, half price. But also it's fun and increased happiness for the employees. Maybe an employee is a little bit quiet inside their shell, and this is a chance if they engage with an educational institution, it might actually bring them out of their shell, give them practice doing presentations, things like that. So Suzanne,
did you want to go through the education?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've talked about a number of these. The couple that I would just add, and I love that also it's like learn from our chat, which I already talked about. But I think, the internship and the employment piece are a couple of things that we just haven't talked about on previous slides. And I think being creative about what you mean by internships within your corporation, I think is really important, because in most instances, when a student would be thinking about Dell, or a faculty advisor might be thinking about advising a student to go to Dell, everybody thinks actually just about the technical aspects of that's what Dell is, right? It's somehow about hardware, maybe there's software, I don't know, it's technical, but really thinking about the full set of jobs, or the full set of jobs that exist and roles that exist within a corporation, and where are those opportunities for internships, I think is something really to consider. Because I've started to think about what would happen if we could have, and by the way, I'm just doing this live, so hello, Todd and Bruce, surprise. But like, what would happen if we could send a faculty member to basically have a fellowship with your learning and development team, for the summer, or we could send a student who's an education major to be with your team in L&D, because that actually that's within the corporation, but you have a specific bent. But it is really an exciting opportunity that students, faculty, staff would never think about. Oh, that's a job at a technical place, because everybody thinks that technical places are only about coding, really, I mean, in the end. And so I think that thinking about internships and thinking about employment opportunities, exposing students, faculty, and staff to all that a corporation has to offer, I think is really important. That's a really important benefit to this, is that people start to say, oh, this isn't just about us getting laptops. No, that's literally not been the topic. That's not the focus of this relationship. It doesn't mean that we won't think about Dell because we're about to purchase a bunch of laptops. It doesn't mean we won't think about Dell, but that wasn't the purpose of the relationship. So I would just encourage, as corporations are thinking about partnerships with education, make sure you think about all of the job categories when you're thinking about internships and employment.
Yeah, that's one of the cool things that we've gotten out of this and that we've seen is just all the other opportunities. Like, corporations and education institutions partnering together, it's not something new. It's been going on, but it's usually more like, all right, we're going to get laptops from them, or we're going to get hardware, or we're going to purchase this, or they're giving us a grant for this building or something like that. But a lot of times just the technical skills and the day-to-day stuff, and like you were saying, Suzanne, like being able to mentor up or partner educational institution, a teacher from there partnering up and doing a fellowship with in a business program at Dell, or watching how we do our day-to-day development, and then bring that back into the university and vice versa. Maybe us going and working at a college or doing some more volunteering there. So yeah, all kinds of advantages that are way beyond just the hardware and the immediate things that we think about. But yeah, a lot of opportunities to help each other and to upskill. All right, let's
Yeah, already got some ideas on that, Suzanne, because I would argue that my alma mater, that I host a student for a couple of days to a week, a couple times a year, where they actually come and help me do my job, and I give they sit in on all the meetings and create content and get to sign off on it. So yeah, already got some ideas there.
So cool. So as far as the best practices, so the main thing, we're doing this to have fun, right? To give back and to feel good. So yeah, have fun and feel good, give back. Also define and set those expectations early on. So what's the project going to be? How long is it going to take to deliver? Really trying to define the more clearer you can be up front, the easier it's going to be as you move forward. It can be very informal. Just talking about stuff and setting up expectations, or it can be a lot more formal and having like a project plan and actually coming up with a project plan document. In our case with Bennett, we didn't do that. It was more informal, but it's really important to sort of just set those expectations. And that's something we did as we were working with Bennett. We're like, all right, we're pretty busy at this point, but we're going to be able to drip this out or deliver this within 2 weeks or a month or whatever. So just setting those expectations. Also, start small. Like I said in this presentation, other ones, I'm a big believer in pilots and starting really small and really seeing how that small pilot works and then expand it from there. Don't just start big and then potentially things can blow up and things go sideways a lot quicker. So yeah, start small, make it manageable, learn from any mistakes, and then go big after that or go larger. Also, share your experience. So a lot of this is giving back, and it's that experience, that volunteering. So share your experience, share it at work. I mean, it's good visibility at work. I mean, as far as corporations, it's good. They like to work with nonprofits and with schools. It's good PR for them. So if you can share what you're doing, I mean, it's not just about PR, but it's good to be able to share that and say what we're doing, how we're helping Bennett, also, but how Dell as a company is giving back to Bennett and to just other nonprofits and institutions. So yeah, share that experience, and then just share with your coworkers what you're learning. Like if there's ways to share, like a blog or video vlogs or something like that, that share your experience, share what you learn. Like what we're doing here is sharing. We're giving back to the community and sharing what our experiences were, and hopefully you guys take some of this and maybe build on it and go from there. All right.
Yep.
Let's see. So next one. All right, how to get started. Let's see, Suzanne, we've got you on this one.
So I think the biggest question is like, but who do I call? Because if you've identified someone or a corporation that you want to work with, I think part of it is figuring out where to go first. I think these sort of conferences are great if your area of interest is sort of learning and development. But I do think conferences and sort of cross industry conferences are helpful because you start to meet different people within an organization or within a company. You can start by looking at if a company has a corporate responsibility area or something like that. I think that works, but trying to think about if you're the institution, what is it that you need, or the nonprofit, what are the kinds of things that you need, figuring out from there, then maybe where to reach out within the organization. And so, we talk about some organizations have a university relations group or some sort of talent acquisition team that you can talk to. But I think really what I would start with is think about the kinds of things that you would really like thought partnership on first, not necessarily like somebody to come and do something, but I need thought partnership. And then think about those roles within the corporation and reach out. You could reach out through human resources. You could reach out through a number of different areas, depending on what the problem is that you're trying to solve. But I would start to think about that and reach out to different departments, because the most common department that everybody's going to reach out to is probably human resources. But start thinking of it a little bit more creatively, and also think about attending meetings or conferences like this.
Yeah, we have a job aid or a little handout how to get started, and we'll go ahead and have David. I think you'll be able to post that to the Whova platform later on, but we'll go ahead and share that out with everyone. It has a list of different group, things. I pasted a couple of ideas into chat that we have from our notes that comes from that the handout.
So the last bit is how can we help each other? So we don't have all the answers. We're still trying to figure this out as we go as well. So we're interested in what you guys think in the audience. Like, how can corporations and education help each other? Have you guys been in any engagements in your own organizations that worked well or maybe didn't work well? What's yeah, share your thoughts. Let us know what you think. We'll take a little bit of time here for anyone to post, and I'll respond to that and then move on.
Yep, we don't know everything, but we like to at least get the creative juices flowing for folks.
Give a little bit more time, see if anything else comes in. So, Suzanne, as far as like your thoughts, what are some other ways that corporations and education can help each other? Like you were just talking about like that fellowship and
yeah, well I think that there's the fellowship idea, and then there's the thinking about what problem are you trying to solve. I'm really focused on like what problems or what thought partnership do you need. I think part of my thinking about opportunities with Dell also started with me saying we can't afford fancy people, but I need talent. And if I can get somebody for Bruce, like you're talking about, students from your alma mater, but that's sort of how I think about how I like to work with corporations. If I can get somebody for a day, an afternoon, an hour, a month, a week, like I will take, there is a problem to be solved that somebody in corporate America or corporate global can help with. And I think it's just a matter of reaching out and having these different kind of conversations other than a transactional conversation, other than a vendor kind of conversation. So I think so that's sort of how corporations can help education. I think education, I actually think we need to be more creative ourselves. I think that right now everybody's saying, oh, we can get interns, yeah, that's true. But there's also other things that we can probably do. As I talked about earlier, we can be test beds for you. We can be thought partners for some things that you're thinking about or working on. There are opportunities for research coming out of, our business departments or a number of different departments where maybe that's a place where we can help to inform what's happening in your world of work, because we're doing the research and we can share with you some of the academic research. But I still think there's a lot more exploration to be done about how to help each other. And I, to this question, we don't have the answers. We don't have them either.
Stay tuned next year.
Yeah.
We'll come back and update you.
As you mentioned earlier, Suzanne, that, during our first meeting, it was more of a, kind of open the books, just a discussion. And that's something that corporate L&D is good at. We're used to working with stakeholders. The stakeholder may come to us saying, I need training in tool X, but then we can say, oh, why are you rolling out tool X? What are the issues that, what are the gaps? Why are you making this change? So we're very good at doing that question and answer with stakeholders. And that's all we did. We considered you a stakeholder at that point and just try to draw the information out and then decided where can we help? Which gaps can we fill? Which ones can't we fill?
All right, I haven't seen anything coming in the chat, and that's the end of our presentation. Just want to say thank you to everyone for joining us today and taking time to learn more about what we've been doing at Dell with Bennett.
All right, fantastic. No, thank you so much. No, that's great. Let me ask a sort of a more general question, since we have an international audience. Are there things, if you're an international, if you're a university outside the US and you might be interested in a partnership, potentially with a company like Dell, there's so many big US companies that seem open to these partnerships. Is there anything you might recommend that they might do other than certainly come to this conference next year and, meet the right people, but something that scales a little bit better than that?
I know, Suzanne, one thing you had mentioned when we were having the discussion, what we were going to talk about is you said name recognition counts. So if you are reaching out to a corporation, let them know who you are, maybe a little about what the needs are, but why it would make sense to engage with that group, whether it's in, historically, an HBCU would make a difference, whether it's a, hey, we're helping people, through the COVID crisis, or the migrant children that are crossing the borders. If you can help put the impact as to, why it would make sense for the corporation to engage with you, that will help the corporation go, oh yeah, it would be good PR. It would be helping the community, and that might help the people, the corporation respond back.
Well, I think this is also a really interesting question, David, because I am on the board of an organization called the Global Learning Council, which is actually based in Germany. And so I think there's actually, you've just sparked something for me. There's an interesting opportunity to bring together sort of this conference and what we do with the Global Learning Council, which is mainly kind of higher education. And we now have some corporations in that group as well. But we've never had this exact discussion. I'm just realizing that based on your question. And so I think there's an opportunity, because we are truly global, and we're so based in Germany, but we have representation from almost every continent. I think that's a great opportunity. So again, thinking about scale, or I think there are opportunities maybe to have conversations also with like the World Economic Forum, where they are talking about the future of universities or the future of work. I think those conversations don't bring together this kind of L&D conversation. I think that what you're forcing me to really realize is actually no one's having this conversation. So I don't have a great answer, but I do have like, oh, now I have some things to follow up on.
Oh, that's great. And we're happy to be more involved at this conference, or if you want to talk about that more, of course, I'd be happy to do that as well. That sounds like there are tremendous numbers of opportunities that maybe just kind of get missed, because people, I mean, we can see this in this conference and its sort of past forms, that we have a mix of people from the academic world and people from the corporate world, and they don't usually go to the same conferences even all that much. And so, there's just, I mean, and I know that from the conferences I go to, there are the academic conferences, and there are the corporate conferences, the ones that David Kelly was talking about, the Learning Guild and, Learning Technologies in London, Paris, and all that. So, so there's a whole world of opportunity there. And I guess another related question is, I know you mentioned, a couple of contexts, but are there any tips for sort of reaching the right people, either within a company or within a university, that are, maybe not always the known channels, that can give you a little bit more of an insight? You'll get someone who might respond, and you won't kind of end up, being, just being sort of thrown into a queue with a whole bunch of other people that someone will get to it. Either side.
Yeah, we're still figuring this out as well, and trying to figure out what that channel is. And we wanted to try and define that even more before we gave this presentation. But it is hard. It's hard. There's different companies have different groups set up, like university relation groups or university engagement. So reaching out, trying to find those groups, like if you can go through a corporate directory or do a Google search, trying to find like university engagement, university relations in a corporation. Usually that's a good place to start, because they have that contact with the school in some aspects. So it may not be them directly, but they can at least point you in the right direction and get you finding the right person.
And I think, go ahead, Bruce.
Nope, go first. Ladies first.
I think that I think on the higher ed side, unfortunately, the answer is like, it depends. It's probably the same answer as in corporate. So like a very small college like Bennett, you could reach out to the president, but also a lot of colleges and universities have sort of like a number two person who's kind of the day-to-day operations person. I think that's a great person to reach out to. And a lot of folks ignore that. And that title is different everywhere, like around the globe. Different titles. They're effectively, like, it could be a chief of staff, it could be chief operations officer. There's lots of versions of it, but that role is often overlooked, I think, by corporations. And actually that's the person who's really probably the best entry point, if you can figure out what that title is, to reach out to, because they're kind of on the lookout, and it's sort of their job to be on the lookout for these opportunities. The other thing in the US context that is increasing is a lot of institutions have kind of a chief innovation officer or a director of innovation. That's a great place. So basically it's who's who's going to be most open to an unusual and different relationship? Because if you go to the typical people, like you suggest, then you're going to get the typical, oh, are you selling me something?
Right.
You know, and so you really want something someone who's more open, or if there's a teaching and learning center and you're talking about learning, you know, I think that's a place corporations don't usually reach out to that department. That's why I'm so struck by your first question. Like, darn it, no, you know, I don't have answers because I hadn't thought about bringing even my own worlds together.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
I'm glad there's an opportunity there. And maybe, I guess, one sort of related follow-up. If you're, you know, if you are particularly university approaching a company and looking for a potential partnership, I think all of you mentioned a little bit about being prepared and having sort of a, you know, a pitch, so to speak. So is there an example you could provide, the kind of thing that would be, you know, that would get people's attention, right? So that you don't get lost in the shuffle. So first is getting to the right people. Second is, what are you going to say that sort of at least is persuasive enough to open the conversation? I know you mentioned having enough name recognition will get you in the door a little bit, but again, you know, so many people are doing interesting things, and just, you know, it takes a little bit of time to really understand what people are doing. And when you're deluged by hundreds or thousands of emails every day, it's hard to get to some of those. So the things that maybe would be examples people can follow to help them get a foot in the door on either direction.
I say trying to find. Oh,
I'll
go
go for
Todd.
it, Bruce.
Okay.
You.
Okay. I was going to say, you know, try to make a connection, because back to your previous question, who to reach out to. You know, the corporate world definitely depends upon LinkedIn. So try and find somebody on LinkedIn that you have a connection with, whether they're a first or second level contact, or, you know, for example, you're interested in the same technologies, then that might end up, you know, getting you in the door, or at least you have something in common. So again, finding something in common with that company and showing the commonality, not so, hey, you're Dell and we need computers. Let's connect. But say, hey, we're trying to upgrade our computer system, and, you know, we're running into these issues that we might be able to use some help, you know, from your company with. That might be and you're reaching out to Dell, that should probably be more likely to get a response than if you were to go contact a consulting agency that, you know, works on business plans and saying, hey, we need help with computers. That's not there's no connection point there.
Yeah, also do a search through the company's website before you go and reach out to them, and just find out what they're interested in. What are some initiatives that they're doing publicly, as far as a company, but also volunteering. What are they giving to and giving back to? So if you can come to a company knowing what they're interested in, and then align that with maybe what you would like to do at your university or ideas that you have, I think you're gonna have a better opportunity of someone listening, and they're not just getting passed by. So I would recommend that. Try and align what you're doing with what they're doing.
I would just say, I think the more, this is going to sound straight, but sort of like the more unusual or different the question or the problem that you're wrestling with, the more likely you are to get a response, because it gets back to the kinds of things that Bruce and Todd highlighted about, like happiness and satisfaction and fun. Because I think that a lot of this relationship is also the thing that allows, at least from a corporate perspective, and I would say even for our faculty and staff, it gets you out of the way you usually think about solving a problem. And so it makes it a bit more fun. It makes it a bit more interesting and intriguing. I'm sure that Dell gets the exact same questions over and over again, and everybody asking for the same things. I think in this instance, I was interested in a really narrow thing because of a presentation, but I think Bruce and Todd were sort of surprised that I was like, I want that. Like, I want to know about that task-based learning thing. And it sounds really niche and like, who else is asking? But that's where the conferences, I think, as you said, David, are important. But it's also, is this a unique problem? If you're bringing the same question and the same problem that everybody else is bringing, and you are not the best known entity asking for that, you're not going to get a response. I don't think that you could. I think that people are looking for unique opportunities for basically their volunteer work.
So David, a question for you? Are there any other conferences like this that's kind of a crossover in between education and the corporate world?
Oh, it's a really good question. I mean, there are a couple. I don't know that many. There's one, actually, speaking of Germany, there's one in Berlin called Online Educa, which is it's a mix of everything. It's every December, and it's actually now owned by the same people who run some of the corporate conferences. And so I've actually been in a number of years. I keep saying I'm going to go back and speak again. I don't think it'll be this year. I had the pandemic. I think I was the year I was going to go. So I will get myself back there. It's every December in Berlin. So that's one that's worth noticing. They do have a mix of corporate and academics all in one place. And they do also have the big expos. They kind of have a little of everything. So that's one international one that comes to mind. In the US, I don't know that I've really run across something like that. I mean, kind of when I started, even our original concept, which is more focused specifically on workplace learning, but was bringing in the research and the practice side. So this is the 14th conference, was in 2008. Part of that was driven by the idea that I didn't really see that out there, right? That I would go to sort of pure academic conferences and talk about research, and then I go to ASTD and, Learning Guild was more practical, and all those had their value, but they didn't bring the groups together. And it seemed that there were sort of almost two silos of things going on. You had people working on really interesting work that, then in academia, and then a group of people on the corporate side who didn't really know that existed. And then the academics didn't really know that there were real world problems that you could be solving that maybe you hadn't realized were out there, and you kind of got everybody together to appreciate the the other approach and the other needs, and hopefully that's been carried over for the last 14 years.
Awesome.
Yeah, this is awesome. A conference like this is awesome, bringing the two worlds, especially that we've worked in both, and so we're familiar with like the learning conferences and the ATDs and the L&D conferences, and yeah, there's a lot of stuff that both can learn from each other that they don't because they're not together, but something like this is awesome.
Great. No, it's great to have you guys. I'm glad you're all enjoying it, and it's so nice to see a group that's an actual mix of corporate and education all in one talk and all in one segment. And it's been such a pleasure to talk with you. So, is there anything else we want to talk about? And if not, I think we can wrap up and start to move on to the next one. It's been great having all three of you through this presentation and through the rest of the conference and participating, and hope we'll see you around through the rest of the day and through tomorrow, and really appreciate it.
Sounds great. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.